talking about overcoming fear, and I'm going to give specific steps now how to do that beyond what we gave you in the last couple of Sundays. And I want to start with an experience I had, a story I had. My dad, from my perspective, as I was growing up, was basically fearless. You couldn't scare him, nothing startled him. It just seems like he was always calm. I didn't realize until probably college or later that his biggest fear was fear of financial failure. And there's a whole big story behind that, which I'm not going to get into. But as I was growing up, I saw him as basically fearless. My mom was kind of a poster child of what fear looked like. She had a lot of personal fears. She had some generational stuff, spirit of fear, things like that. So she was a very fearful person, fought with it all her life. She didn't lay down to it, but she never got free. And the sad part is it was because of the ignorance of the church she didn't get free. I mean, freedom's there. Freedom's available. The church just didn't know how to help her and get her beyond that. So I was exposed to both sides, the fearlessness as well as fearfulness. So between my 8th grade, the summer between my 8th grade and freshman year, I believe what happened is one of my older sisters who lived in Ohio had a baby. So mom and dad, between Springs work and hay, that realm, they got the cows out to the pastures quick, and they went to Ohio for, it was 7 days or 10 days, a week, 10 days, something like that. And I stayed back because we had little pigs and we had stuff that needed to be taken care of, and I didn't really want to go see a baby as a freshman in high school anyway. So they let me stay home and kind of run things. Well, I spent the night, and most of the days I ended up working at home, doing field work, things like that. And days I wasn't working, I worked with my uncle and my aunt, and that's where I spent the nights, was at their house. But I'd always go back to our place and take care of it and check on it and make sure that everything was good and the little pigs were fed and that whole thing. So they were gone for probably a week, and I went back there and got the mail, and we had the key in one of the barns, key to the house, so I wouldn't forget it. And they always, they wanted the mail on the table and make sure I don't lose anything, so we left the key there. So I got the mail and I got the key, and when I went into the barn, I just had this creepy feeling like I was being watched. So I got the key and went to the house and put the stuff away and dealt with things and put the key back and kind of didn't give it a second thought. The next night, well, I'll share that. My cousin came, who lived, he was my cousin. He lived with my aunt and uncle who I was staying with. He came home later that evening. He was older than me. He came home like 11 at night or whatever, and he drove past our place on the way to theirs, and he said the whole place was lit up. And so he pulled in and sat out in front of the house and beeped the horn a few times. He said, like the whole house was lit up. And he thought, well, maybe my parents came home early, unexpected or something. They weren't supposed to be home for a few days. And the whole place was lit up, so he just beeped the horn a few times, and nobody came to the door. And he didn't feel particularly ambitious to go investigate. So he just left. And when he got to home, he tried to wake me, but I was sleeping like a log, and I faintly remember him saying something about, are your parents home? There's lights on in the house, and da-da-da, and he was shaking me, and I was just sawing logs, and I never really came out of it. So early the next morning, someone called and said there's little pigs running all over at our place. So my uncle got me up and he said, you better go check what's going on. So I got going, and I was there because in North Dakota in June, you got the longest days. It's getting light, 4:15, it's starting to get light. So I was there by 5:30, about sunrise time. And yeah, the pigs were out, but I got them back in, and I thought, well, what's that all about? And we had a little electric fence that went along the ground so that they couldn't, because they have a tendency to just kind of push through anything they want to or root underneath it. So that discourages that. And, the best way to check if that's working is you grab it. And it was dead. It wasn't working. So I had to figure out what the deal was, and there was one of the insulators. It looked like a knife had been taken and cut out the insulation and then just wrapped the wire around so it'd be dead, so it wouldn't work. And I thought, well, that's really odd. Why? How did that happen? Well, who would have done that? And it made no sense to me. But I'm there anyway, so I got the mail from the day before and went through the little ritual and got the key and went to the house. So now it's probably 6:30-ish, quarter after 6, something like that. Went to the house, walked into the house, and the first thing I noticed is the mail was spread all over the table. And I'm going, I didn't do that. Nobody else is supposed to be here. That's interesting. So I threw the mail on the table, and I thought, well, did somebody break into the house? And I didn't see anything broken or whatever. But there was other stuff that was out of place. It's like it wasn't where it was the day before. So I poked around a little bit and looked at, to see if there was anything obviously missing. And there wasn't. So I thought, well, I'll call my parents. So I called them and told them, I said, I don't know what's going on, but somebody was in the house. Mail spread all over this, that, and the other. So the first thing Dad wants to know is check the safe, make sure the safe is still there and it's not broken into. So that's back in the bedroom. So I went back into the bedroom, and on the way back into the bedroom, it just was convenient. I walked past the guns. So I just grabbed one, just for the sake of, by this point, I'm 14 years old, and I'm going, I'm going to grab a gun here in case I need to target practice on something, And the safe was fine, so I went back to the phone, and then they had me check a couple of things in their bedroom, and it was fine. And then they said, go to the basement and find out if everything's in order down there. Well, that's a creeper right from the get-go. It's like, so I said, okay, I'll go to the basement. I'll be brave. I got my gun, It wasn't a handgun, it was a rifle. So I go down the stairs, and they told me a few different things to check. Well, when you come down the stairs, if this would be the door at the top of the steps, you come down like this. To this side immediately, 3-4 feet over, is the door that goes into what we used to call the fruit room. It's where you keep the canned goods and potatoes and all that kind of stuff. It's a cool room to keep that kind of stuff. And then when you go this way back in that end of the room is the freezers and all that kind of stuff. And you go around this way, the mechanical room is. So I come down the steps, and they wanted me to check the freezers and make sure nobody had hauled away the meat or whatever. So I went back there, and I opened the freezer. And as I opened it, out of the corner of my eye, I caught that the fruit room door was open about that far, which was a cardinal rule in our house. That has to stay shut. Because if you open it, of course, the warm air from the rest of the house works its way in there, and the room warms up, and it's no longer a cool room to preserve things. And I knew that was closed. I hadn't opened it. And now a kind of a shudder went through me. It's like, ugh. So I pointed the gun that way, and I continued to look in the freezers. And I had to go back over to that room to get upstairs. So that was kind of a quick exit. And I went upstairs and went back to the phone, of course, and, we didn't have anything like this. It's attached to the wall with a cord. You go to it. It doesn't come to you. And it was in the kitchen, so I went back to the phone, and I said, well, everything's fine downstairs. And as far as I can tell, I said, but the fruit room door was standing open. I said, I didn't close it. I said, but that seemed a little odd. Well, you need to close that before you leave, okay? That's the instruction. That's cardinal rule. That door has to stay shut. And Dad said, check one more thing in my desk, which was, okay, you've got the steps that go up from the basement. Well, that's where you came in from the outside. When you came in from the outside, you could go to the left, go to the kitchen, or go right down the steps to the basement. Okay, so to get to his desk, you had to go around that. So I went to his desk, and I had this creepy feeling about the basement. So as I went by, I locked the door that goes to the basement. Went and checked his desk, and came back around. And as I'm coming around, I just stopped for a bit just to listen for anything in the house. You know how old houses are? Certain steps creak certain ways. I'm standing by the door to the basement, and I heard, and I went, someone's about 4 steps down. That's that step. And they just stepped on it. So I ran to the kitchen, very calmly, said, somebody's in the house, I'm getting out. And I slammed the phone, and out the front door, and in the truck and gone. And so I thought, I'm going to get help. So I went to another uncle who lived about a mile and a half away. Went to his house. It's about 6:30 now. I show up at his house. He's only a mile and a half. Didn't take me long to get there at all. And I showed up, and they're finishing breakfast. So I kind of bust in the door and say, there's somebody in the house. I need you guys to come and help me. Okay, well, sit down. We're going to finish breakfast. And my adrenaline's through the roof, you know. So they finish breakfast. Then they decide to still have the morning devotions. So we're pushing 7, 10 after 7 before we even gather things to get out the door. And I don't know yet to this day, was that my uncle's way of giving this person time to get out? Or did he not believe me? And there's no rush. I don't know which one it was. So eventually we got going and we went back down there. And we went through the whole house. And then with them there, I was brave enough to go into the fruit room and see what that was all about. And interestingly enough, when you open the door to go into the fruit room, immediately to the right were the potato bins. It's probably 4 feet wide by 10 feet long, and it's just a walled-off area where they'd put all the potatoes so they keep through the winter. And they'd have boxes stacked in there because when you get them out of the field, you bring them in boxes, put them in there, and stack the boxes to the side for next time around. Conservative people don't throw boxes away. You hold the boxes till next year. So the boxes would always be stacked to the side. And, okay, so it's summer now. Potato bin's almost empty. But the thing that was odd to me is the boxes were taken and made a wall. So when you open the door, as you look to the right, the boxes were stacked up about this high in a wall fashion. And I said, that's to hide anybody sitting in the potato bin. In case you look in the door, you can't see them. Because my parents don't do that. And I'd never seen that before. So anyway, long story short, nobody was in there. Couldn't find anybody. When my parents came back, they found all kinds of things that had been messed with, not only the mail. There was pots and kettles back in the oven or in the storage areas where somebody had cooked in them and never bothered to wash them, just put them away and stuff like that. So somebody had been in there kind of just enjoying the evening. I don't know if it was a bum passing through or I don't know. That kind of stuff happened. But they're not back for 3 or 4 days. I'm still nominated to take care of the place. Now, the uncle and my 2 cousins who came with him are gone. It's the next day. I need to go in the house, check it. I need to check the farm. I need to do all this stuff. Now, we never did find anybody. But don't kid yourself. As a 14-year-old, I wasn't afraid. That goes with that territory. So I had to do something with this. I had to deal with it because I wasn't going to let my parents down, and I was going to do what my jobs were. And you do it right, there's rewards. You drop the ball, you lose your rewards. I ain't dropping the ball. I want my rewards out of this. It's been exciting enough. I want my payment, So I proceeded to force myself to keep doing what I needed to do, not realizing that by watching my dad, who always appeared fearless, I actually had picked up some skills on overcoming fear. And they helped me get through that as a freshman in high school. And I've kind of used them all my life, and I'm not really afraid of a whole lot. Everybody's got issues, but I'm not afraid of a whole lot. But there's steps that you need to do to overcome fear. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. And believe it or not, I actually learned some of them from watching my dad. He never sat down and said, this is what you need to do to overcome fear. I just watched how he lived, and I compared it to Mom. And I said, I don't want to be like that, so I'm going to be like this. And I just imitated him, and he actually just lived some of these steps out. So parents, don't be too discouraged if it appears nothing's soaking in, because sometimes things soak in and you're not even aware of it. So let's do a real brief, get us all on the same page of this series. This is message number 31. So it's going to be really brief. Fear is a faith problem, not a lack of faith problem. People who are afraid of something honestly believe it's going to go bad. It's going to hurt them. Something bad's going to happen. This is not a lack of faith. They really believe it. Fear is we're believing in the wrong thing problem. We're believing the wrong information. That is the difference. It is a stronghold that sets up in our minds that we need to overcome. And our key scripture there was 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5, specifically verse number 5. But dealing with that, just review, we reversed engineered the soul, looking at it from the perspective of the brain. Because my understanding is this. The soul and the brain are, when you look at what the scripture calls soul and what it lists and defines that as, and what the brain's work is, to me, if they're not one and the same, they're like a hand and glove, and they work together. So when you see now, there's so much good Christian research on what the brain works like. So we approach this rather than coming from the scriptural side first and saying, thou shalt not fear. We came from the brain side first and looked at how our brain functions, because whatever's going on in our soul, they've proven is going on in our brain. Soul being mind, will, emotions, intellect, reasoning. That's what the Greek definition is of soul. So we kind of reverse engineered the brain thing, came from that perspective, and what we found out is that 95% of what goes on in our head is subconscious. It's not up on the screen of the computer. It's going on in behind the screen, but running what's up on the screen. So our conscious mind is about 5%. That's what you're listening to me with now. You're paying attention. It's the screen. It's what's up on the screen. 95% is not up on the screen. That 95% controls everything we're not consciously on the screen thinking about. It controls all of our thinking processes and supports them, because what it is all the information and beliefs that we've gathered over the years as being truth, or being a skill, or like, for instance, knowing how to balance. That's all subconscious. When you came this morning and you pulled into the driveway, hopefully you weren't driving subconsciously, because I've done that. Then it's like, okay, I remember turning that corner, but how did I get here? I was thinking about stuff, and it's like, that's not good. But you pulled in, you parked the car. You didn't think, now let's flip one leg out, and then we'll put the other one out. And when we get up, we got to get our balance here. You weren't consciously thinking of any of that. You got up, grabbed the keys, grabbed your Bible or whatever else, flipped the door open, got out, headed, if you were late, come on, guys, we got to go. On the way, beep, you hit the button, and most of that you never paid a conscious thought to. It was all subconscious. It's all running in the background. That's what we're talking about. It affects the way we think, our attitudes, our motives, our emotions. We spend a lot of time talking about that. The subconscious. We showed how the soul works from the brain's perspective, and growing new neurons and clusters and the trees and the branches and the brain's activity, and the process of forming new ways of thinking, renewing the mind, what actually has to happen in the brain to renew the mind, and how it's not replacing old information with new. Those clusters stay there in the brain and always contain the old information. To renew the mind, you actually have to grow new neurons with the new information. And we explained that and talked about that. And the bottom line is, there's a lot of times as Christians we're trying to overcome something, but we're not dealing with the 95% of us that is motivating us to do this. We're just dealing with the 5% on the screen. So we came in from that direction, and when you tie that to 2 Corinthians 10:5, dealing with strongholds, it just fits hand in glove on how they work together. We talked about the time length needed to renew the mind or beliefs and have them stabilize in the brain scientifically. It takes 3+ years if you're just going to go at it yourself. We talked about how revelation knowledge or a rhema word from God can cut that down to weeks or maybe a month or two. And we also talked about Acts chapter 2, verse 4, how in the Amplified says that when the Holy Spirit came upon them, he diffused through their souls and took people who were afraid to do anything literally out in front of thousands of people proclaiming the gospel, could care less if they were going to die or not. Within minutes, there was a change because the Holy Spirit just diffused through them. It's like a drug addict getting prayed for and they walk out free and they came in addicted. To have that happen, scientifically, the miracle that has to take place in the brain is almost overwhelming because all the old addictive neurons have to be bypassed with a brand new system of thinking and feeling that is stable and won't get pulled back in by the myelin sheath and reabsorbed and atrophy. It has to be stable, and they go on the rest of their life as though they were never addicted over one connection with God. That's Acts 2:4. That's the Holy Spirit going, here, let me help you. And he just goes, whew, and literally, if they could camera the brain at that point, it would be totally being rebuilt instantly to cause them to have freedom. So now there are some specific steps to overcoming and getting free of fear. The last couple of messages, we dealt with 3 of them, and I'm just briefly going to touch these, and then we'll go into the steps we have for today. Number 1, fear, the impulse, that first, I think somebody's in the door because the door is open. That first, this feels creepy. That is involuntary. That's just kind of a result of the fall. Adam and Eve had no fear till they sinned. Then they were afraid and hid themselves from God. That first thing that hits us, that old nature, be afraid, is involuntary. It happens to all of us. What we do with that is our choice. We can choose to go with it and be afraid, or we can choose against it and go the other direction and say, I will not fear. That's God's perspective on it, and you'll have to listen to the last 2 messages to be able to understand the scripture behind that and so forth. The second thing is the choice that we decide to either go with the fear or to reject the fear is determined by our information or our belief system, what we believe is true. Most of that choice is made instantaneously. I mean, when you get an opportunity to fear, you're standing at the top of the door, and you stop, and you hear the steps squeak, and you know there's somebody 6 feet away from you, just on the other side of that door. The burst is involuntary there. It just happens. But what you do with it is determined on your beliefs. And at that point, I went into flight mode. Because at that point, I honestly, what came out of my subconscious is, get out of here, I don't care. And I ran. That's an honest fear response. You got fight, flight, or freeze. I didn't freeze. You know, freeze is when you stand there by the door going, and you can't move because somebody's there, and you just, like you paralyzed, you can't move. Fight is when you open the door and you point the gun. I decided to fly. Flight, okay? That information instantaneously comes out of the subconscious. How does the subconscious protect us? For me in that situation, the best thing to do is run. Fly. That choice was determined beforehand. I didn't stand there going, there could be somebody behind the door. I wonder if he's got a gun. Or she, whatever we got here. I wonder if I know him. I have a .22. Yeah, it's an automatic, but it's still going to take a little bit to unload some shells into this person. So I wonder what I should do. Maybe I should open the door. Maybe I should. I didn't contemplate any of that. That's the conscious 5% mind. I didn't contemplate any of that. It was like, get out. That's all that went through me. Get out. And that's what I transferred to my parents. Get out. And I yelled at them nicely, and I slammed the phone. And, of course, they're calling the neighbors and everybody because they're freaked out now in Ohio going, there's somebody in the house. What happened to our son? Kind of thing. So that is based on your information. Number 3, that information in God's realm. And I'm going to clarify that because I'm going to explain it a little bit more this morning. That information in God's realm flows out of the relationship we have with him and what we truly believe is here. As this relationship is, so is the information that ties into us, which causes us to make the choice. At that point, I did not have the relationship with God that I felt I can open this door and God will protect me. I did not have that relationship with him. In fact, at that moment, I didn't even know if he was around. He might have left already. And it wasn't going to happen. But from God's perspective, 1 John 4, perfect love casts out all fear. The stronger the loving relationship we have, number 3. Number 2, the more we know he's got this. He will take care of us. He will watch over us. Everything's going to be okay, which brings us to number 1, so we're going to choose accordingly. And all that happens within a millisecond. We make choices based on those 3 steps. So, had this question come in, want to answer this. How can relationship with God help me deal with my fear of my husband, my fear of my boss? That makes no sense to me. How relationship with God can help me not be afraid of the dark or not be afraid to fly in a plane. So let me briefly explain that. The choice is to go into a dark place or not go into a dark place, to get on a plane, not get on a plane. We can either choose to go with our fear and say, I ain't getting on a plane. I'm not doing it. Or we can choose not to fear and go the other direction. The choice is determined by our information. What do we believe about planes? Are they safe? Are they not safe? Depending upon who's told us stories, depending upon who's died in our immediate family from planes, all kinds of information has gathered. So remember, one of the subconscious main jobs is to protect us. That's how it approaches life for us, to protect us. Anytime you get in a situation that is dangerous to you, the first thing your body does is, if I had a baseball here and I just went like that, some of you are quick enough, you'd grab it. Others would go, now did you contemplate? He's got a ball, he threw it at me. It's coming to hit me in the head. Maybe I should protect myself. And you put your hand up. Did you use the 5% brain or did the 95 kick in and went, doo? See, that's subconscious. That's what happens. When you're on the ice and you start going down, typically speaking, the arms go out. Did you think of catching yourself? No, that's your subconscious saying, we're going to face plant. This won't be good. And within a millisecond, it directs the body to put the arms out, try to break that fall. It's all subconscious. So, how does relationship with God affect any of that? Once you know he's got your back, and this isn't a head thing, this is you've got relationship with him. He's not going to leave you. He's not going to fail you. If anything wants to get at you, it's got to go through him. He's got you. That relationship causes the information in our database to go, I can trust God no matter what situation I'm in, which brings peace to me knowing he will take care of it, which helps me make the choice of, no, I'll fly in this plane, and if any plane will not crash, it's the one I'm in. Why? Well, because I got 5 angels on that wing and 15 on this one, and God's in charge. We're not going down. See, it's a whole different mentality that kicks in because of the relationship. Follow me? So it doesn't make any difference if you're afraid of rock climbing. Well, of course, everything we do is led by the Spirit, right? So before you climb the face of that 50-foot thing that you've never done anything like this before, stop and say, God, should I be doing this? You know, it's always wise just to get his opinion on it. And if you get this, yeah, probably not today, then don't climb it. If he says, yeah, give it a shot, don't be afraid of it. Get your safety ropes on and start working your way up that thing, knowing and believing everything's fine. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So that's how relationship with God helps us. From God's perspective, he says, if you've got a good love relationship with me, you won't fear because I'm here to protect you and take care of you, okay? So that takes us to this point. Number 3, all of us have a relationship with, whether it's God or whatever, we have a relationship with someone or something that determines the choice we're going to make. It's our information, and we choose out of that. If God is not our source to where we're saying, well, you know, God before me, who can be against me? There's no weapon formed against me is going to prosper. You know, you bring out the gun, start shooting. If they even fire, the bullets won't hit me. They'll drop in front of me. They'll go around me, whatever. God will take care of me, provided I'm following the Spirit. And I'm not standing in front of the target out on a firing range going, watch God take care of me. No, that's not probably the best choice. But if you're following the Spirit, and, you know, we've all heard stories where a gunman breaks into the church during a service and goes up to the pastor and says, I'll kill you. And he says, no, you won't. I'm protected. And either the gun don't go off or it fires and the bullets fall out of the barrel. Just strange stuff happens. There's holes in the wall between the gunmen, and it never went through, you know, it went right in line, but it never hit the pastor. There's just all kinds of, why? Because there's a relationship here that says it's all going to be okay. All of us have that relationship some way if we're going to overcome fear. We choose a source to put our security and trust in, and then all the rest of the principles, you'll be amazed how many of the principles I give this morning, you're going to say, yeah, I already do that. Because it works when you have a source, that becomes your information and becomes your choices, and it just flows. If God's not our source, we have a source that gives us security and trust. If a child is walking through the playground of a bunch of bullies, going into the school to talk to the principal about the bullies, and the child is alone, the child's probably going to be fearful. If he's walking through with dad, his source, and he can trust this, he's probably doing things he shouldn't be doing, like, he's egging them on because he knows they're not coming after him as long as I got dad right here. See? So dad becomes the source of the relationship that his information is, dad's here. There's no bully going to attack me. So he makes choices on that basis. Most adults, or as we're getting older, we become the source of number 3. We say, I will not be afraid. I'm a man. I'm in the military. We'll find something to prop ourselves up with so we can say, I can do this. I can trust myself. And that becomes our information. We make the choices out of that. And you know what? It will work. It doesn't work the way God wants it to, because typically speaking, those people get proud. Well, I used to be afraid of the dark, but I just told myself, I'm a man. I mean, I'm strong. I can beat anybody, and I just went in there and blah, blah, blah. Hear the pride beginning to go, look at me, I'm something. Because we're not supposed to be our own source. He's our source. He's the vine, we're the branches. We draw life out of him. So, but something is the source. So you say, well, I know people who've overcome their fear and they didn't have a relationship with God at all. Exactly, but they have a source that they trust will come through for them. whether it be dad walking through the parking lot with them, or whether it be the boss at work saying, I'll cover this for you, I'll take care of it. And that person becomes the source, so they lose their fear and they go, okay, boss got this. Or it's they themselves saying, I'll blow the bum's head off, I'll take care of this. And they make themselves the source. But there's always a source, number 3, that we look to and say, yeah, we're okay. Follow me? So if the question comes up of, well, I know people who've overcome fear and they have no relationship with God at all. Well, yeah, but they have a source that they're trusting to take care of them, whether it be themselves or whoever, something they're trusting. Smith & Wesson, whatever it is. They got a source, and they believe that's going to take care of them. Okay, so now, a basic principle to start in on this. Faith without works is dead. This principle is huge in overcoming fear. In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. This is true of fear faith, which fear faith is, you're not believing what God says. You're believing, yeah, this is going to really go bad, and this could go south, and if I walk into that dark room, I just know there's a boogeyman behind the door, and he's going to bite me, and I'm going to get rabies, and, the mind just goes. Fear faith, I'm afraid, and I believe what I'm afraid of. There's a principle. Whether it's fear faith or it's fearless faith, we always accompany what we believe by certain actions. These actions, number 2, reinforce either the fear in us or the fearlessness in us of what our brain, our soul, our subconscious believes. In my case, when I heard the creak on the steps, the physical actions were, bye-bye, I'm out of here. And I ran, went to flight mode. Fear always goes to fight, flight, or freeze. To overcome fear, you can't go there. But there's always actions that show us we're afraid. Our body responds as we're afraid. This is absolutely crucial to overcoming fear. If I'm standing behind a door and you come walking by and I go, boo, there's going to be likely, if you're a fearful person, there's going to be a physical reaction. It's going to be, ah, or some people just go, and they freeze right up. And then others, like my wife, you go boo, and you go like this, because there's a fist coming. She goes immediately to fight. She's told me, she said, you better be careful when you try to scare me, because one of these days I'm going to punch you dead in the face. I said, well, why would you make that decision? She said, isn't it a decision? It's just going to happen. And later I'll feel bad about it, but see, that's fight. It's immediately, she doesn't go, or, she goes. So there's a physical reaction. To stop fear, you can't keep doing the physical response. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. That's contradictory. If you're afraid of the dark, do any of you have basements that were dark and you had to send your children down to do something in them, and you hear them, screaming all the way down? And they're running down the steps and they're getting the can of peas or whatever, all the way back up, That's just the old days, huh? Evidently, all our basements are different now and they're well lit. But I remember doing that. I remember my friends, we'd get to school and we'd laugh, it was great, man. Yeah, we had an adrenaline rush through the roof because we were just freaked out. And the worst thing was if you had older siblings, because they were down there waiting for you. They're going to reinforce your fear. And the screaming is, and all of a sudden, it changes because here they were. The beliefs that create fear tell us to do something. Physical action. Faith or belief without works is dead. If you're really afraid of something, there's going to be physical action that follows that. If you're really not afraid of something, there will be physical action that follows that. I'm not easily afraid. So, I mean, my kids have tried, my wife has tried. All kinds of things try to scare me, and they get so frustrated because it's like, ah! And I go, uh-huh. Because I'm not afraid. So the physical action is, uh-huh, okay. Oh, you're no fun at all. You know, it's like, well, depending upon how we believe, the physical action will follow. The belief that creates fear tells you to do something, both ways, whether it's fearless faith or fearful faith. So now, to take this and apply it. Fearless faith, steps to overcoming fear. Remember, fear is a choice because God said, don't fear. Do not be afraid. It's a command. It's an instruction. You don't command someone to do something they can't do. So God says, don't fear. So we make the choice to fear or to not fear. It's our choice. Once that initial burst is there, we choose what we're going to do with it based on our information. So to change the fear, you have to change the information. So it starts with what we covered in the last couple of Sundays, and I'm not going to go through these. I'll just put them up there so that as you watch the message later, the points are there, and you can work back through it. There I've got dealing with the brain part at the top, and then 2 Corinthians 10. We have to deal with the arguments and the theories and the reasonings, everything that spills out of the subconscious that says this is why we should be afraid to fly. This is why we should be afraid to ever ski or ride a snowmobile or anything like that. This is why. All that stuff has to be dealt with, and it spills out of the subconscious. And then number 3, we draw our strength and ability from someplace. It's supposed to be from God. So here's step number 4. This is new. Conform ourselves to fear not, do not be afraid. There's the Romans 12:2. Do not conform yourself any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. To get out of fear, you can't just say, I'm not going to be afraid. You have to change the information that's making you afraid. So you can't conform to that information anymore. You've got to renew that. Conforming to the pattern of the world or to the pattern of fear has to start with the mind to change that. That's what we have spent boohoo messages on, showing you how that works, what we need to do that. So that's just saying that's where you got to start. Point number 5, to do that, we join works and actions with our newly formed or belief system. If we're trying to be unafraid of flying, we research flying, we find out how many people actually die flying, this airline, how many planes have gone down for this particular airline. We've got new information, and we've got new beliefs that, you know what, this probably is not as dangerous as I've been led to believe. I'll probably live through this. So we join works or actions with that. We begin to go toward making the choice and eventually make the choice to buy a ticket and fly. It's a process. You have to join works with your faith or your belief, or it's worthless. If you say, well, I'm not afraid of flying, I just don't ever want to. Uh-huh. Well, no, I prayed about it, and I'm no longer afraid of it. Well, let's go flying. Now we'll find out if there's still fear there or not. I want you to go with me. Well, no, I would never put you out like that. And here come all the excuses. I wouldn't want you to pay for a ticket, and I wouldn't want to be a bother, and then, and all the stuff. No, actually, we're going. I bought the ticket already. Let's go. And then the white comes in the face, and the eyes get big, and the breathing changes. Yeah, you're still afraid. So you can't keep doing life like you're afraid and overcome it by just saying, well, I'm no longer afraid. If you were no longer afraid, you'd do life different. How you do life is showing whether you're fearful or fearless. So to actually do point number 4, which was conform ourselves to not being afraid. Conform ourselves to the command God said, do not fear. Do not be afraid. Fear not. Something's going to have to change in how we live, what we do, how we approach this fear. So here's what we do. To do that, we join works and actions with our newly formed beliefs. We verbally agree or we verbally declare our new beliefs, and we verbally disagree and we verbally declare that we don't go with the old fear beliefs. Remember, the subconscious cannot receive new information if you think it back and forth and you just argue with yourself. It responds to verbal input because the word of faith is near you, even in your mouth. If you're going to change how you believe, it's got to come out of your mouth. If you're going to change your subconscious, you have to speak it. So that new information goes in, and then it argues with you, and then you tell it why the new information is true, and you renew your mind. So if you're afraid of the dark, most children are afraid of the dark. Every one of mine struggled with it some more than others, but afraid of the dark. So the question is, how many times have you ever been attacked in the dark? Other than your brother going boo. How many times was there a stranger there who actually grabbed you? How many times have you been hurt in the dark? How many times? And you go through these questions. What are you doing? You're challenging the belief that says, if I go in there, something bad's going to happen. You're challenging it with truth. Well, what's the truth? Nothing has ever happened that's bad. So why are you believing this lie and living by it? And the person has to start verbally agreeing with, there's no reason for me to be afraid of the dark because nothing bad has ever happened to me. So now we're making number 3, the relationship experiences. But ultimately, it needs to come to, well, if there's anybody in the dark, God's with me. And he's going to see these 2 huge angels walk in the room with me, and they're going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid, because of God's going to cover my back in this. If you don't start verbalizing, I will not be afraid of the dark for these reasons, and start going the reasons why you won't be afraid, and verbalizing your disagreement with the fear, nothing changes in the fear realm. When I had to go back in the house the next day, I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was doing what some of you do. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. There's nobody in the house. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid because there's nobody in the house. I still have my gun. I got my gun. I'm not be afraid. There's nobody in the house. If somebody's in the house, they better get out because I'll probably shoot them because I'm not going to be afraid. What was I doing? I was doing what Dad said when he saw us afraid of something, and he'd say, you've got nothing to be afraid of. He verbalized, oh yeah, I do. I got to be afraid of that. Why? And then we'd give him the reasons, and he would disarm them. Letter B. Verbal disagreement with, no, you don't have to be afraid of that. This, that, and the other. And without even knowing it, I was copying my dad saying, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. All the while, I was afraid. But I was forcing myself to believe it's going to be okay and take the actions of going back into that house, not running from the house, not staying away from the house. I'm going back into that house. How'd you get yourself in there? I'm not going to be afraid. And a lot of sweat pouring off my brow. But I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to give in to that. That's where it starts. Then you disobey the old beliefs or the beliefs of fear. You disobey the fear. I'm not going to do what fear is telling me to do. Fear is telling me to let the house rot until Mom and Dad come home. I don't care what's happening in there. It ain't my issue. I don't own it. I'm a kid here. We want to be a grown-up until we face something like that, and all of a sudden I'm still pretty young. I'm a kid, This is Mom and Dad's issue. That's what fear would tell you to do. You cannot go with that and overcome fear. You have to go the other way. I'm not going to obey this fear. I'm going to do the opposite of what it's telling me to do, which takes you to forced obedience to the new beliefs and declarations. Remember in 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says, taking every thought captive and leading it into the obedience of Christ. That's what you do with fear. A lot of other things too, but it's what you do with fear. You force the obedience. You don't let your body make the choice. You don't let your adrenaline make the choice. You don't let the racing mind make the choice. I am going to go back into that house, expose yourself to the thing you're afraid of. And it can be an all-at-once approach. However, science has shown that for most people, an incremental approach is better. And we're running low on time, but I'm going to share this. Mary and I were dating. Before we got married, I took her home to North Dakota and introduced her to my parents. We had a bunch of snow there. I had my snowmobile there. So we had what we called the Crow Hill. It's a very huge hill. It's the people who owned it, their last name was K-R-O-H, Crow, so we called it the Crow Hill. And they owned it, and it was awesome for snowmobiling and sled riding. It was about the size of what you call mountains here, like Wild Mountain and stuff like that. Those are not mountains, those are hills. Go to Colorado or Montana, you'll find a mountain. Those are just hills. Well, we had one of those not far from where we lived. So I took her over there, and this is where we did a lot of snowmobiling and sled riding and this, that, and the other. And we had the old sled I used to use, and you'd get going about 35, 40 miles an hour down that thing. And I wanted to do that, but it's like a quarter mile. I don't want to walk back up. So I want Mary to take the snowmobile down. So she brings me back up. I ain't going to walk this quarter mile while she's sitting on the top going, "Hi, honey." She was spitless scared to drive that snowmobile down that hill because she came from Wisconsin. It's all flat except for a ski hill. And she had never been on a ski hill, so she's not doing this. And I said, "Oh, come on. You just point it straight. If you turn going down, well, then you can roll. But if you keep the skis straight down the hill, you will be fine." "I'm not doing it. I'm not going to. No way. I ain't doing it." Well, we're still dating, so she didn't punch me, okay, because things could go awry. So I said, and it's sitting there idling, and she's sitting on it. I said, "This is easy. Can you put your hands on the handlebars. Feel it?" "Yeah." I said, "Just point it straight. This is the brake. If you start going too fast, give it a little brake. It'll slow down. Just drive down away from me." I am not doing this. And I reached over and I hit the gas. We were right at the edge. I hit the gas just to give it a, and it's like an all-at-once approach. And you're at the top of the hill, and the snow drifts kind of blow in behind, so there's like a 5-6 foot, it goes, and then you just go down the hill. And I hit the gas, we're right at the edge. I knew it was going to happen. I didn't want to walk back up the hill. Come on. So I had it all set up. Once she's going down, there's no coming back. And she'll realize she was safe, and when she gets to the bottom, she will love me that much more. So I just reached over and over the edge she went. "Ah!" Oh, that's all I heard. All the way down. It never stopped. She got to the bottom and she stopped. "Ah!" And I'm going, well, I better go down there. So I got on the sled and I went down there. I don't know if she's forgiven me yet. She brought it up not too long ago that it wasn't her favorite experience. That's the all-at-once approach. See, I could have drove down with her on the back and showed her. But I was young and dumb and full of myself, and "Honey, you'll be fine." There you go. Like, for instance, if you have fear of water or swimming, all-at-once approach is go to the deep end and jump in. That doesn't always work for everybody. I'm kind of that person. It's like, well, let's just get it over with. They've proven the best way is if you've got fear of swimming in water, go to the kiddie end, sit on the side, and maybe dangle your feet in for a while and realize you didn't die. And then maybe stand up and walk around in the kiddie end where it's up to your calves and you're okay. And slowly, incrementally, you're talking to yourself saying, "I will not fear. If I fall over, it's 12 inches deep. I can lift myself up and breathe." You're getting new information into the subconscious that is going, "We're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to drown. This is horrible." You're putting new information in, you're countering that, you're verbalizing it, you're incrementally walking through this. You have to force obedience to the truth, the new beliefs, the declarations. You have to expose yourself to that and force yourself to walk through it, realizing it'll be okay. You can do that all at once, which I don't recommend. You can do that to your girlfriend or boyfriend all at once, which I recommend even less now. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but incremental is the better approach. When you succeed and you're sitting on the edge of the pool and your feet are in the water and you're actually living through this, reinforce the success, because your data center needs to hear we're okay. See? We're not drowning. Everything's fine. Verbally reinforce that. Reward yourself with, hey, this is working. I'm doing pretty good. And re-engage and do it again and again, and then take another incremental step and go a little deeper. If you fail, you have to go back and readdress where it went wrong. You put your feet in the water, you went into a panic attack, and they had to drag you out of there because you're flailing and screaming and kicking. To overcome that fear, you're going to have to go back and do it again. If you say, well, I'm just not going to be afraid of water, I just will never go close to it, you're afraid of water. You have to go back and readdress it. And to readdress it, you give the truth, but there's always bodily, faith without works is dead, there's always bodily engagement you have to do to reinforce that truth that you're telling your program doesn't have to be afraid. You have to readdress the failures and go back and do it again. If you don't, you'll stay afraid. Now, we can apply that many, many, many areas. But there are people who, because of COVID, are locked in their house, come out very seldom. When they come out, they have a gallon of sanitizer in this hand, the mask in this hand, and rubber gloves on because they're going to be safe. And I'm not, if somebody's got fear of this, I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just trying to exaggerate the situation. At some point, to get past the fear of COVID, you have to have the information that says I'll be okay. Amen. Now, that source could be the vaccine. Maybe you think the vaccine's going to be the thing. Well, that's fine. If you want to go that route, something has to be the source you put your trust in to say, okay, I'll be okay. Whether it be the vaccine, whether it be social distancing and the mask, whether it be God, and just grab one of those coronaviruses, put it on my hand, and watch it. It's going to die in my hand. Because the righteousness of God and the glory of God that is on me will kill that stupid thing. No. So I don't need to wear a mask or rubber gloves my faith is not in the mask. My faith is in my God. Okay? But you got to have a source someplace. To get over the fear, at some point, the mask will have to come off. The door in the house will have to open. You have to leave and confront the fear. Now prepare, take it in incremental steps. Get the information, get the understanding. There's tons of it out there. Get the information, get the understanding. But you can't keep doing the same old thing and overcome the fear. At some point, you have to engage the fear and do the opposite it's telling you to do. If it's telling you to run, you stand. If it's telling you to scream, you go quiet. When my mom died, I'm over time, but I'm going to go as quick as I can. When my mom died in our house in Colorado, she had fear problems. She had a spirit of fear. We went to North Dakota and had the funeral and so forth. Came back to the house. I opened the door, walked in, and literally the hair on my neck and everything just stood up. Wasn't expecting any of this, just like, whoo, this is horrible. And Mary walks in behind me. What in the world got into this place? I said, what does it feel like? Fear. I have never been so afraid in all my life as I was when I walked in the house, because that spirit was there waiting to get on me and my children. And all I would have had to do is go with it. And it would have had a landing pad, and now we're in a new generation, and here we go. And I was knowledgeable enough to say, I know what's going on. Mary, you take the kids. I got some work to do. And I went into the bedroom. Our bedroom is where she died. Went into the bedroom, and I'm an all or, all at once, It's not like, click the light on. That's not me. I walked in there, light stayed off, I closed the door, I said, you come here, stand in front of me, I'm dealing with you now, you will not have me or my family. And I spoke to it like another person dealt with it and got rid of it, and then went around the property and took the family on the outside of the property. We had, little piece of property. And man, they're just, yeah, Dad, it feels horrible out here. I know, that's why we're out here. We're going to pour some oil, we're going to deal with this. Clean this property back up. You have to step, to me, I go to she died in this bedroom. There's a spirit of fear here. It wants me to turn on every light in the place, call the cops, call somebody for help. I am freaked out here. Let's just leave and spend the night in a motel, whatever. You have to do the opposite and say, I'm not calling anybody. I'm not going to a motel. And by the way, my personal approach is not incremental. My personal approach is I'm going to go in the bedroom, I'm going to turn the light off, and you and me are going to have it out right here, right now. You have to go address the fear. I have never been so afraid in all my life. It's like it was alive in me. Well, how did you go do that? Forced obedience. You take every thought and make it captive, bring it into obedience to Christ, and lead it where it needs to go. I knew what it was. I knew it was a demonic spirit. I knew it had to be dealt with. I am not going to back up for you that much, because if I would have, it would have went, and now I'd have had a bigger problem. No matter what the fear is, you have to go to it, and what you believe will be acted out physically. The more information you have that it's going to be okay for whatever the source is, my source is God's going to take care of this, it's going to be okay. More information you have of that, the more choice you make against fear. Therefore, we're not going to a motel. No, we're going to spend the night here. We're not going to turn all the lights on in the house, because that's what fear is telling me to do. I'm not going to call for friends to come over and help me pray, because I'm afraid to do it alone. Everything fear is telling you to do, you disobey that and you go the opposite direction. You can do that incrementally. There wouldn't have been anything wrong with peeking in the door and clicking the light on a few times and, doing an SOS kind of thing. It's just as long as you get there. You have to confront it. You have to get there. You have to deal with it. When we give in to the physical response, whether it be staying home and the door locked with our mask on in the house, we are acting in fear. To get over that fear, we have to somehow change all those actions. They will change on the basis of you're believing wrong information. Change the information, you'll make different choices, and everything will change for you. So there's a process here. Once we walk through the process, it renews our mind and grows and expands our brain and our soul. And it will reinforce the truths of fearlessness to move you into freedom. If we get somebody in the prayer line and there's a demon manifesting, I've been around this often enough. I've had it reinforced often enough. Just walking into the bedroom in the dark. You know what? Nothing grabbed me. Nothing choked me. Nothing killed me. Nothing hit me. Nothing whatever. The more times that gets reinforced, the more courage you get. More fearlessness you get. You're just not afraid anymore. And it doesn't hurt to have someone walk through it with you. I mean, I'm just kind of like an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be that way. Incrementally, have someone, as we're growing up, it's dad walking with me through the playground. That's why I'm not fearless. It doesn't hurt to have someone help you walk through it. But to get rid of fear, you have to face it. You have to verbally address it. You have to renew the information in the database that's telling you why you have to be afraid. That has to be changed to what the real truth is. And then as that changes, you have to begin living that, acting it out. Faith without works is dead. It has to come shoe leather.